The Sparabara. The Sparabara were the most common type of infantry found in the Achaemenid armies. They were brought up from the common ranks of Persian society, such as farmers, hunters, and fishermen. Like most armies of the time, they were not a standing force, called to service by Persian officials in the spring and ending their military duties by the end of autumn, returning to the Shah's armies in the next spring, and so forward. The Sparabara were above their eastern counterparts due to the type of training that the Persian youth overtook. Taking their education by the age of 7, they would learn the quintessential aspects that the Persians held sacred, such as basic combat, archery, horse riding, and swimming. When they reached 20, their education was finished, being ready to be deployed in the Achaemenid armies. Upon their years of training, the Persian officers responsible to mount the Sparabara regiments would pick those that showed better performance basic combat aspect, arming them with a 6-foot spear, a large wicker shield, and quilted linen corselets for their bodies. The role of the Sparabara in the Achaemenid armies was to create a wall of shields and spears to protect the archers that would be behind them, hailing volley after volley to the enemy. When the first stage of the battle ended and the enemy infantry came into contact, the Sparabara were the first sent to fight the enemy. If outnumbered or engaged against an heavier opponent, the Sparabara would retreat to safer lines of the Achaemenid army. That was due to their low payment and their desire to return to their families and jobs. The Sparabara were one of the 4 essential parts for the success of the Achaemenid Empire. However, with the passing of the centuries, the Persian military stagnated, letting the Sparabara to remain mostly the same throughout their existence. And by the time of Darius III, they couldn't contend against the better-equipped Macedonian infantry, marking Alexander the Great's conquest of the Achaemenid Empire. The Thanvabara. The Thanvabara were the main archer unit of the Achaemenid armies. They came from the same background as the Sparabara, where, after their education, those that shone more prowess with a bow and arrow would be picked up for the Thanvabara regiments. The Achaemenids regarded archery with high esteem, leaving the Thanvabara to be better trained and paid than most archers of Western Asia. They were equipped with linen corselets, high-quality composite bows, and for close quarters, the Persian dagger, the akinaka. As common with the Eastern tactics of the age, the Thanvabara's role in the army was of long-range attack behind a wall of shield and spears from the Sparabara. Only if the situation became dire that the Thanvabara would plunge themselves into melee. Their use on the battlefield was always based on foot. Even if their composite bows favored mounted warfare, the Achaemenids always relied on conquered peoples or mercenaries for the horse archers. The Shahs favored greatly the Thanvabara, giving them more opportunities of promotion to the standing army than the Sparabara, and of loot in case of victory in a battle. Like the Sparabara, the Thanvabara remained the same for centuries, but unlike the infantry, the Persian archers were still deadlier than any other type of archer on the known world. That is why when Alexander the Great conquered the Achaemenid Empire in 330 BC, he employed many Thanvabara to bolster his forces, and with them, he was able to reach all the way to the Indus Valley. The Asabari. The Asabari were the main cavalry force of the Achaemenid armies. They were recruited not like the basic infantry, but instead taken from the wealthier landowners that could afford to maintain horses. Horse riding was seen as the pivotal, most important aspect to the life of every Persian. Several regulations would be stipulated by the Achaemenid officials to regulate cavalry maintenance so that the owners could bring only the best horses to the battlefield. The Asabari were better equipped than the standard infantry and archer regiments, so was their importance to the Persian armies. Being armored with a quilted linen cuirass, and instead of wearing the typical saffron headdress, they would wear a bronze helmet of the Assyrian style for extra protection. For their weapons, they would have upon them a couple of javelins for skirmishing purposes, while for close combat, they would possess short spears or axes. Although they were better protected than most common Persian forces, their main weapon was still speed and maneuverability. Never able to stand for too long in a prolonged melee, the Asabari would first pepper the enemy lines with their javelins to disrupt the enemy formations, and when all missiles were spent, they would concentrate in small and large-scale charges to the enemy flanks and rear. When in need to regroup to form a new charge, they would fall back to the range of the Persian archers, so that they could be protected if they had to retreat from pursuing opponents. There were several additional roles that the Asabari served in the Achaemenid armies, such as serving in scout duties to find out about the enemy army compositions and terrain details, and in mopping operations against any retreating opponent. Because of their cultural and military importance, the Asabari were greatly rewarded on the amounts of loot and promotions of rank and land. Over the course of their lifespan, the Asabari were subject to several reforms, every time making them heavier and more prone to prolonged melee. Such reforms reached to their peak at the time of Cyrus the Younger, that in a certain way tried to Hellenize the Achaemenid army by adding Greek-style equipment to his armies, and even using them in a way similar as one day Alexander would use his cavalry in the conquest of the Achaemenid Empire. Alexander would have many Asabari in his forces to supplement his weary and depleted companion cavalry, and with them he would conclude his expansion east to the borders of India. The Takabara. The Takabara was an Iranian tribe that the Achaemenids greatly used. Originally known as the Parasu, the Persians named them Takabara because of the arms which they carried, the taka, a crescent-shaped shield that allowed them great maneuverability. The Takabara were also armed with axes capable of cleaving through bronze in the hands of the vicious tribesmen, called the Sagaris. They wouldn't possess any type of body armor on the battlefield, which seriously undermined their use on the open plains. But if their charge against an enemy line was successful, they would be able to cut many before being taken down. Due to such an impediment, the Takabara found service mostly on garrison duties, since the walled settlements would protect them against arrow fire. Some of them would also have javelins to pepper the enemy sieging their settlements. These tribesmen would live in isolated communities, far away from the more populated settlements, on the mountains and valleys of the Iranian plateau. They didn't receive the Achaemenid education of basic combat, archery, horse riding, and swimming, but their own values and traditions made them incredible and ferocious warriors that were able to hold longer than your typical Persian infantry. The evolution of this unit and of the entire military of the Achaemenid Empire was tremendous due to these tribes. The Taka shield became immensely popular due to its maneuverability and effectiveness in quick-paced warfare, allowing for multiple Persian soldiers to adopt the Taka shield, becoming a staple of the Achaemenid military. For the Takabara, their evolution was towards putting more body armor into them, so that their weakness in the open plains are negated by putting them in heavy armor, instead of the regular tunics that they once used in battle. Although the Takabara became more proficient on open battle against the most eastern units of the 4th century BC, the Macedonian invasion of the Achaemenid Empire made them fight against a technologically superior opponent, leaving their short axes no match for the 20-foot Sarissa pikes. Other Takabara simply fled or allowed for the Macedonian sovereignty, slowly declining their warrior status due to the new Greek standards of warfare, almost falling out of memory.